Welcome back to Real Business. Bruce, do you often think that people hold back information from their accountants?
You know, Astrid, I do. I think one of the biggest problems people have with their accountants is that they see them sometimes as the enemy, and they think that keeping things from them will help them get a good result, which isn't always the case. Well, next up, I discussed exactly these problems with Nikki Viljoen from Viljoen Consulting. Having a well-run business is reliant on everyone doing their job properly. That means there needs to be clear lines of communication. And in the case of your accountant, they need to know what you need in as much as you need to know what they need from you. Here to talk about managing your relationship with your accountant, I have Nikki Viljoen from Viljoen Consulting. Nikki, thanks for coming in.
You're welcome, Bruce.
Nikki, what is the difference between a bookkeeper, an accountant and an auditor?
Okay, well, a bookkeeper is someone who has basic skills in terms of doing addition and subtraction, in terms of company books. They are the first rung in the ladder. An accountant is generally someone who is accredited, who has the CA and whatever other letters behind their name that the law requires, and they are in essence, in terms of compliance, are required in terms of people who have PTY companies. An auditor, there are two different types of auditors. There are the auditors like your Deloittes and your Kessel Feinsteins, and those are the guys that come in at very expensive rates to audit the company books. They look primarily at the financial aspects of what happens in a company. An internal auditor is someone who looks at a holistic view of the company. They look at policies, procedures and controls. They do look at the financial aspect, but they put in more controls in order to prevent fraudulent things from happening, and they then also audit afterwards to see that all those controls and policies are in fact being kept up to date.
Now, you mentioned internal audit there. I've always related that to big corporates, not to an SME environment.
I think I might be the only one in the country, actually. An internal audit is an expensive commodity. It doesn't come cheap. And there's a lot of people who would say, yes, we need them, no, we don't. It's depending on which viewpoint that you have. The big corporates have them because they need to have everybody working on the same page, doing all the admin and everything in the same manner. The small SMMEs, they generally fudge it and just go whichever way that they can or whichever way they think is easier for them to handle.
Okay. Now, how important is the accountant in a small and medium-sized entity?
First of all, in my opinion, I think that there are two aspects that bring most of the SMMEs down, and that is either when someone tries to do their own books or when they don't have any administrative procedures in place. To try and do your own book is the same as someone, if you're not a qualified bookkeeper, is the same as someone trying to service their car and they don't know which part of the engine belongs where. That is it in a nutshell.
So how important is this relationship?
It's of vital importance. You've got to have someone that you can trust, who has your best interests in your business at heart. The financials, if you don't have the financials right, if you don't have your costings right, if you don't control your expenses, if you don't have a hands-on approach to your income, you might as well just close the doors now because you're wasting your time.
Now, you mentioned there's somebody you can trust. If I was a small business looking for an accountant, what are the key things you would consider that I should be looking for in the type of person I want to get in to be my bookkeeper or accountant?
Well, I think you should interview your accountant or bookkeeper pretty much in the same way that you would interview a staff member. You wouldn't just hire them over a beer at the pub. You would look at their references. You would perhaps phone around, see who they've worked for, have a look at when last they went on a course. Are they up to date with the tax requirements? Are they up to date with legislation? Do they know how to register you for the various compliance things that you need to be registered?
And why do those relationships go wrong?
They go wrong mainly because as a business owner, people get think they get very clever and they try to hide things from the bookkeeper. Now you do that, it's fine, except that when the bookkeeper does your tax return, they in turn don't put all the things down that need to be put down to be claimed or to be looked at, or where you can get money back from the receiver of revenue, and that's where the relationship breaks down. Your bookkeeper, your accountant, your auditor, you have to have 100% rapport with them, you have to have compatibility, you have to have integrity, and you have to have credibility.
So why do people see their accountants as the enemy sometimes?
Because the accountant is the person that tells them how much money has to go to SARS, and no one likes to pay SARS.
No, that is true. Now, one of the things for small and medium-sized enterprises is cash flow is always a big problem for them. Now, if we're looking at getting an accountant or bookkeeper, do you think it's something you should have in-house, or do you think it's something that you could genuinely outsource?
I think it would depend on the size of your business. I mean, if you're a one-man business, you certainly don't have to have an in-house somebody. A one-man business, if you're looking at between, say, 20 or 30 invoices a month, it would take probably between 2, maybe 2.5 hours a month for someone who knows what they're doing to do your books. Now, if you cost it out, for example, to yourself, have a look at what you earn on an hourly rate, and you're not a qualified bookkeeper, so that 2.5 to 3 hours is going to take you 6 to 7 hours. You're charging yourself more than what your books are worth.
So you can actually end up saving money when you think about it.
Absolutely. You know, the other temptation is always you're busy, you've got things to get out, so I'll do the books on the weekend, you shove them to one side, and before you know it, a whole year has gone by. You have no idea where you stand, you don't know who's been paid, who still owes you, you don't know what your cash flow is like, you don't know how much you owe the tax man. It becomes a nightmare.
No, it does.
It's easier just to give it to somebody once a month, let them do it, get a set of management reports. Be sure you understand what those management reports are. Having a report for the sake of having a report, it's like having a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. It's useless.
I think that's a good advice. And also, I can't think of many people who'd want to spend time on the weekend doing accounts.
No.
Nikki, thanks very much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
My thanks again to Nikki Viljoen from Viljoen Consulting for joining me today. As you can see, managing your relationships properly is a vital component of managing one's business.